Hi, this is Renee with Free Tours by Foot. I'm going to take you on a brief tour of the Lower Manhattan and Financial District in New York City. The Charging Bull, designed by Occulus, and actually it was originally dropped off in the middle of the night, December 15, 1989, in front of the New York Stock Exchange. In 1987, we had our second biggest stock market drop. That brought on a worldwide recession. The artist, Occulus, cast the bull, showing that we were the first to come out of that recession. So the bull's right hoof is forward, and that means he's on the move. His head is down, nostrils are flared, he's charging into the commercial arena. Because of security at the New York Stock Exchange, the bull was brought here to Bowling Green. And there is a myth about the bull. It's supposed to be good luck financially to have your picture taken rubbing the two golden orbs that dangle between his back legs. That's why you're going to see a whole line of people down here. And if you get to notice them, they are a little shinier than the rest of his anatomy. All times of the year, all kinds of weather, you're going to come down here and you're going to find people lined up to get their picture taken with the bull. We're going into Bowling Green. Originally, this was an open-air marketplace that the Dutch had to allow the American Indians to come in and trade. We had a good relationship with the American Indians in the early days. And then at one point in our history, this was a bowling green. The Dutch introduced duck pins, lawn bowling, and then it became a formal park. A statue of King George III of England once stood in this park. In 1664, the British took over Manhattan Island and they imposed taxes on the people who lived here who got upset. They said, we have no representation in Parliament. Parliament has no right to tax us. Parliament passed the Stamp Act, tax on all legal documents. The people were so irate that they organized to overthrow the monarchy's rule. King George III heard about that, so he repealed the Stamp Act. And when he did, they put a statue of him in this park. The fence around the edge went up in 1767 to keep the riffraff out of the park. And on each post was a crown. July 9th, 1776, our Declaration of Independence was read up near City Hall. The people were so excited, they marched down through the streets and they pulled down the statue of King George III. And they wrenched the crowns off the top of the posts, melting down the metal and creating ammunition, which they then used against the British soldiers and sailors who were on board ships in the harbor, having fled Boston. This, originally the Alexander Hamilton Customs House. Alexander Hamilton started our first Coast Guard called the Revenue Marines. Now the Customs House was quite controversial when it went up because most of our federal government buildings are based on Greek or Roman architecture, and this is a Parisian style of architecture, designed by Cass Gilbert. Now across the top on the frieze are 12 statues, and those 12 statues represent 12 seafaring nations from around the globe. To the right of center is Christopher Columbus. The ladies out front represent the major continents of the world. And these were designed by Daniel Chester French. We'll get into some details on our regular tour, but just know if these were designed today, they would look very different. No longer a customs house. Our customs house moved into the World Trade Center, 1970s, and this was empty. A gentleman named High had an American Indian collection, all kinds of artifacts, over 800,000 pieces. When he passed away, his family offered them to the Smithsonian Institution. Smithsonian runs our major museums, most of which are in Washington, D.C., but the Customs House was empty. So today, this is the Museum of the American Indian. Open 7 days a week, and it is free to get into. I always recommend people go inside because the building is beautiful. And they rotate the displays because they have so many displays. The flagpole presented to us by the Dutch, because once the British took over Manhattan Island in 1664, people pretty soon forgot that the Dutch were the original settlers, so they presented us with the flagpole. At the top flies the New York City flag, also a flag of the New York City Parks Department. So we're down here by Battery Park. The Battery, this is where they originally stored ammunition. It was actually on a separate island from Manhattan, so if there was a fire or an explosion, it wouldn't damage the area where people were living. Became a fort for the War of 1812, and then in 1855, it became an immigration registration center. So immigrants were coming into this country looking for new opportunities. They came over by ship. The ships went into the harbor, over to the port. They put the people on ferries, ferried them from the port onto this island. So 1855 to 1890, this is where people came to register. The statue was actually erected in 1982 to remind people that this was our first area of immigration registration. By then, we had so many new people coming over that they couldn't handle it here. 3,000 people a day were trying to get registered. So this was run by the state of New York government. The federal government then opened up Ellis Island. We'll go down by Water's Edge and we'll see Ellis Island. So the Battery, 1855 to 1892, federal government opens up Ellis Island in 1892. Ellis Island was across the river. Ships, again, came into the harbor. First-class passengers did not have to go to Ellis Island. They registered right on board ship. Third-class steerage passengers were ferried over there. Closed in 1954 because we weren't having waves of immigrants come by boat anymore. And in the same harbor, you have the Statue of Liberty, given to us as a gift from the French people to memorialize the relationship between the French and the Americans. French helped us fight the British in the Revolutionary War. We helped the French reorganize after their revolution. So they wanted to memorialize the relationship between the two countries as we came up on the 100th anniversary of the founding of our country. Out in the harbor, you're going to see several boats. There's a ferry right here. This is how you get over to the Statue of Liberty. You can take one of the ferries. It'll take you to the statue, and then it'll take you over to Ellis Island. Same price. It's a wonderful way to spend half a day. This memorial was dedicated by President Kennedy. On these columns are the names of our service people whose bodies lie at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean from sea battles in World War II. So you have Army, Navy, Marines, Army Air Corps, people whose families had no bodies to bury. So they're listed on the columns by branch of service. They are in alphabetical order, and they even tell you what state in the Union they originally came from. People often ask, how is this brick house still standing with all the tall buildings? Originally built as a private home for the Watson family, the architect, John McComb Jr., curved the front of it to follow the curve of the road. Nobody was doing that in residential architecture back then. The Catholic Church bought it in the 1920s to help Catholic immigrants have a place to stay when they got off their ships. Then became the home of Mother Seton, the first Roman Catholic saint born in the United States. Next door, 17 State Street is curved to follow the curve of the road, but I think that looks like a sail full of wind going out into the harbor, because on that site, Herman Melville was born. Herman Melville wrote the novel Moby Dick about that great white whale. He also wrote a short story called Bartleby the Scrivener about working on Wall Street, and we're going to head up to Wall Street. But behind me right now is the Staten Island Ferry Terminal. If you don't have 4 hours to give up on your trip to New York City, what you should do is take the Staten Island Ferry. It goes across in front of the lady, so you get to see her full frontal view. And then on the way back, you get to see the beautiful skyline of New York City. I always tell people, take the Staten Island Ferry at night. The lady's all lit up at night, and she is beautiful. Also, you can get a cocktail on the ferry at night. It is considered the best, cheapest date in New York City, because you get invited on a free ferry ride, but your date only has to buy you the drink.
So if you're enjoying the tour so far, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps others discover the video. If you'd like to see more like this one, subscribe to our channel. We have walks across the Brooklyn Bridge, through Harlem, Central Park, all over New York. Visit our website for more about our tours, our travel tips, and more. We also have virtual tours and channels that focus on Washington, D.C., New Orleans, London, and more. Look for free tours by foot wherever you travel. You can support your guide with virtual tips, links in the description. And let us know what else you want to see. Leave a comment below. Now, back to the tour.
Behind me is Fraunces Tavern, originally a wooden house built for the Delancey family, but Mr. Fraunces came up from the Caribbean and purchased it. He opened up the Queen's Head Inn. But when the Sons of Liberty started meeting there, talking about overthrowing the monarchy's rule, they changed the name from Queen's Head Inn to Fraunces Tavern. After the Revolutionary War, George Washington came back to Manhattan Island triumphant. He brought his officers there for lunch, thanked them for their service to the country, and then he went down to Virginia and stepped down as Commander-in-Chief. So upstairs is a museum, and downstairs is a restaurant run by the Sons of the American Revolution. We're coming along Pearl Street. Pearl Street, named after the fact that they used the oyster shells originally to pave the streets. What's the color of an inside of the oyster shell? But it's pearl. Over here is an archaeological dig. This used to be a parking lot. When they constructed this building, they dug down and they found the foundation of the old Lovelace Tavern. These gray blocks are the outline of the old Lovelace Tavern. Those metal sails over the top of the blue umbrellas, that's going to slip. That's where the ships would come in and dock. Sailors would come off the ships, come to the tavern, have a pint of ale, smoke their clay pipes. And when they dug down here, they found old porcelain and old clay pipes. These yellow bricks, these are the outline of the original City Hall in New York City, going back to the 1670s. So this was the major thoroughfare, and the water was right down there. We had 2 cisterns over there. The water in New York City polluted right away. So they would collect rainwater, but they actually drank beer and cider, starting with breakfast. You couldn't drink the water, you got cholera, but they drank beer because you didn't get sick, not knowing about bacteria, boiled the water to make the beer. And this originally was called Brewer's Lane. Today it's Stone Street. This was our first paved street in New York City, paved with the ballast stones that were on the sailing ships to hold the ships low in the water so that the wind didn't blow them over. Today, all outdoor cafes, okay? And this has been like this for decades. So each building has a different type of restaurant. I always tell people, go take the Staten Island ferry, go see the Statue of Liberty, come back over here and have something to eat. You'll find some kind of food that you'll be interested in trying. Hanover Square. This is a memorial dedicated by Queen Elizabeth II to the 57 Brits who died in the World Trade Center on September 11th. Actually, at the dedication, Queen Elizabeth did come and make a few statements. Every year on September 11th, there is a short ceremony here to remember those people who passed that day. We're coming up on Delmonico's, but I want to point out here, we have a bagel place, Leo's Bagels, best bagels in Lower Manhattan. Bagels, pizza crust, hard rolls in New York City are different than any place else in the country because the water is delivered here via stone aqueducts. The water picks up the minerals in the stone. So when they bake, it tastes a little different. Crust gets nice and hard, but the inside side stays nice and moist. Delmonico's restaurant, the first high-class restaurant in New York City. They claim to have invented lobster Newburgh, chicken a la king, and baked Alaska. Now this burned in the fire of 1835. We had a fire in Lower Manhattan that winter. More than 670 buildings burned down. So Delmonico's moved up toward Midtown as the wealthier people moved up into Midtown, bigger pieces of property and bigger houses. But they came back down here in 1991. Today, they're known as a steakhouse and oyster house. Behind me is 40 Wall Street, and this was the tallest building in the world for 3 days. So 1929, architects are having a competition. Who's going to build the tallest building? Mr. Severance was building this for the Bank of Manhattan. Mr. Van Allen was building the Chrysler building up on 42nd Street. They got in a one-on-one competition. Severance found out Van Allen was going to stop the Chrysler building at 925 feet tall, so he built this 927 feet tall. And it opened up to great media fanfare, tallest building in the world. What Severance didn't know is that Van Allen was building the spire to the Chrysler building in the air shaft. So 3 days after that opened, they pushed the spire up in 2 pieces and attached it to the top of the building in 90 minutes. And the Chrysler building became the tallest structure in the world, even taller than the Eiffel Tower. That was May 1930. March 1931, the Empire State Building opened, 1,250 feet tall, and until 1972, it was the tallest building in the world. George Washington is standing on what would have been the balcony of City Hall in New York City. This is where George Washington took his oath of office to become President of the United States. Originally, Congress was here, City Hall, inside City Hall, and this is where our Bill of Rights was written and passed. And across the street, we have the New York Stock Exchange. Stocks and bonds were traded in this country going all the way back to the days of the Dutch. And originally, stocks and bonds were traded in restaurants and cafes, even on street corners. After the Revolutionary War, there was a lot of corruption in this industry. So a group of stockbrokers met under a buttonwood tree on the other end of Wall Street, and they formed the New York Stock Exchange. That burned in the fire of 1835, so they moved up here and built this building. Wall Street got its name from a wooden wall that the Dutch built around their settlement. It extended along the North River, we call the Hudson, the East River, and then this was the northern boundary of New Amsterdam. Everything to the south was part of New Amsterdam. And this wall stayed up even after the British took over. It was originally erected not to keep out the American Indians, but to keep out the British, who were already settled up in New England. We're going to go all the way up to the end of Wall Street to Trinity Church. This is Trinity Church, founded 1696. When the monarchy took over Manhattan Island with the British, they owned all the land, so they leased to the Americans 200 acres to start a church and a community. The payment on that land lease, 1 peppercorn a year. Peppercorns were spices and they were expensive. This was an Anglican church formed when King Henry VIII wanted a divorce from his first wife. Pope wouldn't give him a divorce, so he started his own church. In the Anglican service, they have petitions to the monarchy, and at the end, they used to do 3 cheers to the king or the queen. After the Revolutionary War, those prayers were outlawed. Any minister heard saying them could be hanged. When you take those prayers out of the Anglican service, you have the Episcopal Church of the United States. And this now operates as an Episcopal church. 1976, Queen Elizabeth came to visit, and she actually came here for Sunday services, and they handed her a jar of peppercorns, signifying every year of that land lease. To which Prince Philip said, That's nothing to sneeze at. We're headed up what's called the Canyon of Heroes. It's a man-made canyon because of all the tall buildings. Called the Canyon of Heroes because in the sidewalks, you're going to see dates and names. Those tell you every ticker tape parade ever held. They start down Battery Park, they go all the way up to City Hall. Now, many of these are the names of kings and queens and heads of state. Then we have ticker tape parades for our sports teams. Today, they're so expensive to have and then to clean up after. The only time we have a ticker tape parade is when one of our sports teams wins the championship. So our last two ticker tape parades, the women's soccer team winning the World Cup. We're at the World Trade Center in the Memorial Gardens. We're at the South Tower reflecting pond. And on these walls are the names of the people who died in Pennsylvania when that plane went down so they couldn't hit anything. The people who died at the Pentagon, the plane that hit the Pentagon. 443 first responders, members of the New York City Fire Department, New York City Police, Port Authority has their own police. They all rushed in when everybody else was rushing out. The North Tower Pond on the other side of the gardens has the names of the people who died here in 1993 in the bombing and the people who died here on September 11th from 90 different countries, and not just Christians and Jews. 343 Muslims died here that day, as well as Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, agnostics. Now, the names are not raised lettering. The names are all cut out of the brass because the people are gone. They're missing. Lights come up through the names. I hope you were able to hear the reflecting ponds in the background. It's a very soothing sound. People will come, find their loved ones' names. Often we'll see flowers stuck in the names. That's because it's a birthday or an anniversary. This is a beautiful place to visit. And actually, they are building across the street in St. Nicholas, Greek Orthodox Church. There's going to be a meditation room for people who come to visit the memorial. We're at the new World Trade Center site. Originally 6 buildings on this site, but we're supposed to have 4, but I'm going to tell you things are changing over time. Behind me is Tower 4, and this was the first building to open at the World Trade Center. It opened about 5 years ago. And then we have Tower 3. This opened up actually June in 2019. We're going across the street because I want you to get a good look at Tower 1. 1,776 feet tall. It is the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, and it's now the 6th tallest building in the world. The original Twin Towers were 110 floors. That's only 104, but it's taller because of the spire at the top. So you can see new construction going on over my shoulder. That's going to be a new performing arts center. That was not in the original plans, but as I said, things change over time. And then you have the bones sticking out. That's the Calatrava Transportation Center. Mr. Calatrava said he designed it to be the bones in the wings of a dove. but it's called the Oculus. So people think it's an eyeball with the eyelashes. But when you stand in front of it, I think it looks like a sea monster coming out of the Hudson River. And when you go inside, you feel like you're in the belly of a whale. There's all bones. The structure is there for you to see through. Today, it's a mall, all underground, underneath us. So there's shopping, there's places to eat, free public restrooms that are beautifully clean. So I know you have trouble when you come to New York City in finding free public restrooms. Just know the World Trade Center has them for you. To my right is the museum, and the museum is a short building because it's all underground. Give yourself 3 hours, even 4 if you want to see everything and listen to every video. It's a very moving tribute to those people who died on September 11th. Down the side is a kiosk, and on those kiosks, you can key in the names of anybody that you know who died here in '93 or died anywhere on September 11th. They'll tell you if their names are on the South Tower Pond or the North Tower Pond, and it'll even tell you what panel you can find the names on. This is very well laid out. To me, by the way, the saddest names are Mrs. So-and-so and her unborn child. Behind me, St. Paul's Chapel. This is part of the Trinity Church community. Now, opened 1806, and this is actually where George Washington came to pray after he took his oath of office as president, standing on the balcony of City Hall. But September 11th, this is where first responders came in to take a break between trying to help people out of the towers. This is where they were stationed for several weeks while they were hoping to find survivors in the rubble. And if you remember, after September 11th, there was an iron fence that had yellow ribbons on it with people's pictures asking, have you seen this person? That was this fence. This is Renee Ruiski, and I'm hoping that you enjoyed this brief overview of the Lower Manhattan and Financial District of New York City. I'm hoping when you come into the city, you'll take the longer 2-hour tour and take some of the other tours in the other neighborhoods here with free tours by foot. You'll really enjoy yourself. And I'm hoping you enjoyed this so much that you will leave a tip with the contact at the end of this video. If you have questions, you can always email the company and we'll be happy to help you.